Welcome into the College Football Overtime Podcast. We are just days away from college football finally being back into the fold. Week 0 action is just coming up on the weekend. So we are really excited for that. But we still have to do some SEC previews. We got to talk some ball down in the land down under. So we are going to do that right here on the College Football Overtime Podcast. We're going to give our tiers in the conference, and then we're going to discuss, who's in which tier, and then kind of go through the conference and step by step dig into some of these teams here in the Southeastern Conference, who's just had a national championship streak broken, another one of those streaks that they just seem to set into motion every couple of years. And they have some newcomers that we got to talk about, Texas and Oklahoma. You ever heard of those guys? Yeah, well, they're in the SEC now. So lots of interesting stuff happening in college football. So make sure you follow along with us, Abe Gordon, Garrett Chapman, here on the College Football Overtime Podcast. Like, subscribe, set some notifications, drop us a comment, tell us what you want us to cover if you want something in particular. Otherwise, just follow along, throw us a like, let's have some fun together. So we're going to talk a lot of SEC ball. Before we do that, Abe Gordon, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good, man. Like you said, just a couple of days now from kick, so we are raring to go, man. I'm about to put some pads on my damn self.
I got my college football shirt on. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see my college football shirt. I'm ready to go. I'm rearing. I'm champing at the bit. I had to go digging into my drawers to go find this. Not really. It was sitting right there at the very top because I like to wear this shirt because I love college football. It's my absolute favorite. So, hey, what do you say? Let's jump into this discussion. I'm just going to drop one little marker down here. SEC preview. That's all you need here on the College Football Overtime Podcast. We're all ready to go. So we're going to give our tiers. And so basically what this is going to be, I have 4 tiers. Abe tells me he has a different number of tiers for a different reason. But what we're going to do is we're going to dig into this and just sort of discuss which teams are on top, which teams are in the middle, and which teams are right down there on bottom. Because until you actually have games that are just separating these teams, Abe, I don't know how you feel about this necessarily. The best way to describe teams is in tiers. People who try to rank teams who haven't played football yet, it's a little foolish. We talked about the AP poll when it was released a couple of episodes ago, but it's foolish. It's wrong every year. There are several teams on that list that are completely and totally out of place. Now, if we did tiers, that would be a little bit different. So that's what we're going to do here today. Let's start it in this number one. In the number one category, it's pretty obvious who's going to be up top, right? It's the Georgia Bulldogs. They're the best team in America. The national championship runs through them. It's there. Texas is in that group too, and a team with a new coach, Kalen DeBoer. Alabama's still really good. And I feel like a lot of teams, a lot of programs, mostly the fan bases, have cheered the demise of the Alabama Crimson Tide a little bit too early. Kalen DeBoer is still there. That is my favorites tier. That's the top. I'll get into my number 2, the contender tier. It's the team the group that I think could potentially, if things go their way, be really good next year. It's Ole Miss. They're the transfer capital of the conference. They've got some really good players. Lane Kiffin's been, you talk about Kirby Smart having a boogeyman and that being Nick Saban. You can say the exact same thing about Lane Kiffin and his former head coach. He's a guy who just was never able to get over the hump against Nick Saban. In fact, Nick Saban routinely beat the crap out of him. Now he's gone. And I wonder if that sort of mental release helps Lane Kiffin just a little bit. Missouri is in this list too. Eli Drinkwitz had a resurgent year in 2023. Let's see if they can do it again. I think they're really good. They're going to have some pieces back. Tennessee is in this list too. LSU is the team that rounds out that group. I think those teams could vie for an SEC championship. They can be really good this season. I wonder if they can get to that next level, though. There are a couple of things holding them back, not quite at that top level. Tier 3 is a chaos creator. These are teams who I don't think are going to win an SEC championship. If things go really well for them, maybe they can make a play for a college football playoff, which the contenders I see as teams who are probably going to be in the college football playoff, which is at 12 teams, by the way, which is still a little weird to say. But the chaos creators, I don't necessarily put them in that category, but they also could be the reason why a team is not in the college football playoff or potentially in the SEC championship game. Let's go through this team. Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Auburn, Kentucky, and South Carolina. Those are your chaos creators. And then maybe next time with a new guy. These are guys who might have a new head coach. Florida, Arkansas, Mississippi State's just got a new guy as a head coach, but they're still They have to have a tier there. They got to be in that little category for Jeff Levy and company. But Vanderbilt is the last one. They round out that group. Abe, what do you think? And tell me why I'm right.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of your teams kind of in that same group. I have some slightly different tiers on mine, but look, I think the guys up top are obvious. The teams chasing them are kind of obvious as well. So
Yeah.
you break down the bottom half of the SEC as you want, but we're going to be pretty in lined up top.
Yeah. And that's just the reality of the situation. I mean, you have the fifth tier. Walk me through your tiers.
Yeah, so I went with we were talking on the last podcast about the dog involvement in some of these shows. I went with a dog theme
I love
for
the dog theme.
not
Great.
related to Georgia or Mississippi State, just so anyone knows. But I did go with a dog theme for my tiers. So tier 1 to me is the leaders of the pack. That's the obvious trio up top in the SEC: Georgia, Texas, and Alabama, the teams that you feel are most likely to contend for a title, probably safest bets to make a college football playoff. But right behind them in tier 2, my nipping at the heels right there: Ole Miss, Missouri, LSU, and Tennessee. If something goes right for these teams, if something goes wrong for the squads ahead of them, they're right there waiting to pounce.
Okay.
Tier number 3, don't turn your back on them. Don't break eye contact. Let them know who the alpha is. Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and Auburn. These are
Good
teams
list.
that if you give them a chance, they can get you, right?
Yeah.
But the teams above them, if you don't give them a chance, it should all work out as well. So that's tier 3. Tier 4, I got Florida, South Carolina, and Kentucky. Those are my accidental biters. They can ruin the day here or there, but ultimately they're sweet pups, right? And they're going to fall in line and do what they're supposed to and probably lose the games that we expect them to lose. But on a given day, they can jump out and get you. So keep an eye on those. And then poor tier 5, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt. Tails between their legs tier. Sorry, fellas. That's kind of just what it is this year.
Abe, that's tremendous. That's an A+. I love it. Even if I look, I like the extra tier because when you built out one for Oklahoma, Auburn, and Texas A&M, that's where they live. Those 3 are the teams that are in that little grouping right there.
They feel dangerous on a more consistent basis than the Florida, Kentucky, South Carolina. And that's just kind of why I wanted to separate that group.
Yeah, because you have any team that goes into Jordan-Hare Stadium, for example. I mean, Auburn can be a not very good team, but you go on a road trip to Auburn, they'll jump you. They'll take advantage of you. It's a hard place to play. And look, they got to do it 6 times in Jordan-Hare Stadium. So look, they're going to be a good football team next year, and I think they have some answers potentially at the wide receiver position, but questions in other places, and that's why they are not quite a contender yet. So, Abe, what do you say? I like that list. I really like the categories too. That's an A+ for me. But let's go through this real quick. So I do want to dig into some of these teams in particular. Let's start with the rest and get into the best. Starting with Vanderbilt, and it's kind of starting off with a dud. No offense to any Commodores out there, but look, you have a new quarterback, New Mexico State transfer, Diego Pavia. I mean, okay, Clark Lay's. I'd be surprised if he makes it this season. I like Clark Lay. I think he's a good coach. I think he came from Stanford. He was a solid defensive coordinator out there. It's just a really hard place to win. It's just that's just all there is to it. It's a tough place to play. They're going through all of these reconstructions at the stadium and everything else. And last year, they were a bit of a laughing stock in the process. And it's a tough place to win. It doesn't help when you have a massive portal exodus and you lose your best players on a consistent basis. You talk about teams that just get pilfered from. The Vanderbilt Commodores, if they have a good player or two, they're going to be gone soon. Look at Ray Davis, for example. I mean, he goes off to Kentucky and has a really good career there. It's just a tough time to be a Commodore, and it's going to get a little bit uglier here. They may not win a game in the SEC next year.
Yeah, look, without looking at their schedule, we kind of know what the expectations are. It's going to be very tough for Clark Lee to keep his job, and that's just kind of what it is. Maybe they surprise a couple of things, but they're replacing a ton of guys on the offensive line. And when you're doing that while welcoming in a new quarterback, just very difficult.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. They got their work cut out for him. And then another place where you kind of got your work cut out for you is Mississippi State. Jeff Lebby comes in, and I think he's a good. I mean, another really good coach, a guy who was offensive coordinator over there at Oklahoma. He's coming into Starkville, and you lose Rodgers, and once you lose Rodgers, man, you lose an all-time passer, like a guy who could really throw that rock around. And now you talk about the island of misfit toys. You lose Jaquavius Marks, you lose lots of playmakers, you lose guys who really were the identity of this football team. And it's not that they're going to be bad as much as it is they just have pretty big question marks. And you have a brand new head coach, you have a brand new team, lots of rebuilding that's going to be happening over there in Starkville.
Yeah, I've talked about this a couple of podcasts ago, Garrett, but for me, for Mississippi State and really any team, and this will go for any team that's hired a new coach, this first year is about setting a standard. This is not about getting back to the level you should be at every year. It's about setting a base and then building from there. That's what this year is. And if you're Mississippi State, 3, 4, 5 wins, maybe 1 win in conference, 2 wins in conference, just start there and then build up. But it's not going to all come back at once.
Yeah. And then you go into the rest of the rest, I should say. Taylor Green is under center over there in Fayetteville with Arkansas. You got a head coach who's kind of on the hot seat. I mean, it's not a really good spot there for Sam Pittman, but look, you got Bobby Petrino and it's going to be a weird situation with that. That combination is going to be. Look, I'm not a big fan of Bobby Petrino for personal reasons. Of course, I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan. I grew up that way, and dude has not made it easy to cheer for him. Dude has not made it easy for people to like him. So I'm not going to say much more than that. But Taylor Green, look, he's an ideal fit for what Bobby Petrino wants to do on offense. This schedule is just going to be brutal again. For somebody who really has a calling card for strong offensive line play, Sam Pittman has not recruited the offensive line necessarily all that well. I'm a little worried about what this team is going to do. I'm a little worried that Taylor Green, I mean, like for as good as he is, it doesn't do him much good if he's playing the game on his back. It's going to be another tough year for Arkansas. I think they could surprise a couple of teams potentially, but for the most part, it's going to be kind of rough going for Arkansas.
Yeah, I mean, look, this year's about what Bobby Petrino can do to this offense. They just simply don't have the talent. It's going to be very tough for Sam Pittman to do much to keep his job. But if there's any hope, it's that Bobby Petrino still has whatever he had in terms of creating powerful offenses. And we'll see if that's enough to keep them interesting and competitive.
Moving into another team that's in what used to be the Eastern Conference, the Florida Gators. I wanted to look at the schedule too and just pull it straight up because good God, Abe Gordon. I know it's been said several times. If you're a college football fan, you've probably heard this before. But August 31st, you start off week 1 against Miami. That's a tough game. Then it's Texas A&M in your next league matchup. That's your SEC opener. You're on the road at Mississippi State, which those cowbells, weird things happen. And Jeff Lebby, of course, is going to be looking for that marquee first SEC win. That is a situation where he might be looking to get that done. UCF, that's not a slouch opponent right there. That's a Big 12 opponent, a good football team here with Gus Malzahn. They're going to be a really good team this year coming up in the Big 12 at Tennessee. Then you got Kentucky. Wow. What, Garrett, why are you saying that's a tough schedule? That's a pretty tough schedule. That's really brutal for most teams, right? Well, that's when it gets fun, right? Because then you get Georgia in Jacksonville. Then you're on the road at Texas. Then you got LSU at home. Then you got Ole Miss at home. Then you go on the road and play Florida State, the defending ACC champions. Abe Gordon, you talk about the front end of that schedule. That's not an easy schedule. That's no cakewalk of a schedule right there to start the season. What they have at the end of the season is by all means a death warrant. A death warrant for even some of the best teams in America. Florida is a team that I think is going to be one of the better and more improved teams. Florida may also win 4 games.
Yeah, this is probably a year where, especially if you're Billy Napier, you're hoping people aren't judging you on your win-loss, but kind of what you can put up. But I also think that there's an opportunity here for Florida, and I know the schedule does look tough, but if you can build yourself into this season, though, and kind of get some belief going, maybe you have an opportunity to catch a team towards that back end that maybe their first half didn't go the way that they wanted. Maybe they're not walking as confidently as they should. I mean, that's kind of what you're hoping for, is you could play your way into the season. Going to be about the quarterback play. Graham Mertz, DJ Lagway. There's going to be some combination of both of them, I would imagine. And so very interested to see how that works out. But Florida's got to get back to doing what they do. The offense has not been good enough. The defense has not been good enough either. But the recruits have been pretty good compared to where they had been in recent years. So we'll see if he can put that to work.
Yeah, I'm really interested in Graham Mertz. I think he was one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the country last year, at least in the SEC. He put together some pretty good performances last year. It's just being consistent and doing that at a consistent level. I mean, this team, Billy Napier's team, it just has a couple of question marks. And I do think that a lot of people are counting them out a little too soon, including myself. We'll find out very quickly who they are. Miami is going to be a great game. That's going to be a lot of fun for a lot of reasons. I mean, Florida fans hate Miami fans, and Miami fans hate Florida fans. And you'll have a chance too. I mean, they have a chance to win a state of Florida national championship. It's weird that Florida State championship. That's probably a better way to say that, not a national championship. Because you do play UCF, you play Miami, and you play Florida State. So I love that that's going to be happening there down south in the Sunshine State. But moving up to the Palmetto State, you got a team that's replacing its quarterback, it's replacing its running back, it's replacing all three of its wide receivers, and it's replacing its tight end. It's a bad spot for South Carolina and Shane Beamer. You got a couple of good pieces that have come in to supplement those losses, but losing Spencer Rattler, losing Juice Wells, losing guys like that to the next level and to the transfer portal, it's going to be tough to replace. And the schedule, a lot of people talk about the Florida schedule. South Carolina's got a tough schedule too. You know, you've got LSU at home, you've got Ole Miss at home. You're on the road at Alabama, and then you follow that up with a road trip to Oklahoma, and then you got Texas A&M at home. That stretch right there is as bad as most teams in the country will ever have. That's tough. And South Carolina may not have enough horses to really keep up in the SEC at this point. We've seen them in flashes, what Shane Beamer can be. But at what point is Shane Beamer going to turn this into a consistent contender? I don't know if that happens this year. I'm a little worried that it won't happen at all for Shane Beamer if it doesn't happen soon.
Yeah, and they're counting on a lot of transfers offensively. Obviously, the biggest one, Rocket Sanders at running back. But they got a trio of receivers that are going to be new to this team here, transferred in. And I don't know who's going to be the starting quarterback, if it's going to be Sellers or if it's going to be Robbie Ashford from the Auburn transfer. But they got a long way to go to match up. And it's just, when you don't have the talent in this conference, it's just going to be a tough ride week in, week out.
Yeah, I mean, another team that I think a lot better than most people have given them credit for, the Auburn Tigers, a team that I think was 6-7 last year off the top of my head. A team that returns its quarterback, Peyton Thorne, in Hugh Freeze's offense. That is where the questions lie, the quarterback position, because the wide receiver spot, Jarquez Hunter, he's going to be in the backfield. He might be an all SEC caliber running back. They'll be solid there. The wide receivers are fresh. Kendrick Lambert, he comes in from Penn State, and then you've got some fresh-faced recruits, 5-star guys who are in there who are going to come in and be difference makers potentially. But at the end of the day, Peyton Thorne has to win the day. Peyton Thorne has to be a consistent go-getter for this team. He has to be a guy who can win them football games. We haven't seen that yet from him. I mean, when he was at Michigan State, he was solid at times. And then we saw him be not quite so solid. And most of his time down on the plains has been not so solid. I want to see Hugh Freeze. And Hugh Freeze, I think this team could be a problem. I mean, I have them on my Chaos Creator. They could jump up and bite somebody very quickly. And I wonder who that's going to be, because the wide receiver room is potent. It's talented. They'll be able to run the ball. The defense is going to be strong like it always is. And if you're playing a game at Jordan-Hare Stadium, bless your heart. But I just need to see it with some consistency before I can really elevate them into that contender category.
Yeah, I'm not as high on them as you seem to be, but I am high as them at home. And for the teams they get at home, I think they can be dangerous. I think we've seen that. Quite frankly, they should have won the Iron Bowl last year. Obviously, that crazy play at the end from Jalen Milroe. But Yeah, I think they can be dangerous in spurts, in moments, and that's kind of why I had them, in the category don't turn your back on them. Like, keep, be aware of what's going on there. But we'll see. I'm still not convinced that Peyton Thorne is good enough at quarterback either.
No, he's just that's where the fault lies, and I just need to see a little bit more from him. Cam Coleman, though, I mean that cat's special. He's really good. Everything that we've heard from camp is that the guy is going to come in and be an immediate difference maker. And I mean, you just supplement talent right there, and I think they have a chance to really come in and bite some people. But consistency, consistency, consistency. It's what they've lacked for a little while. And Hugh Freeze, damn good football coach. We'll see if he can finally get that team. Not finally, but like get to that team next to that, up to that next level in year 2, which I think will be pretty solid. But the Kentucky Wildcats are an interesting team for me, mostly because of what they have added in the transfer portal. I mean, I think we've talked a lot about Ole Miss and what that team has added in the portal, but the Wildcats specifically, Brock Vandegrift and Chip Trainum. Of course, Chip Trainum came in from Ohio State, a really talented running back out there in the Buckeye State who comes over. He was a backup, really talented. The guy can run. He can do a lot of good things with his legs. But Brock Vandegrift has a cannon, a rocket. And if any Georgia fans are out there listening to this podcast right now, you know what you've heard from that guy. He can throw the ball all over the field. And look, his second SEC game is against the Georgia Bulldogs. Your first one's going to be against South Carolina. That's where we're really going to figure out where we can separate the wheat from the chaff. That's where that game is going to happen. And then you got a chance against Georgia. I want to see what they can do. It's a home game, and Georgia's struggled at Kentucky a couple of times. And I don't know if they're necessarily going to have the horses to keep up with Georgia, but you've got a solid defense. It's going to be back again next year. It's got a strong identity, and you've got a great quarterback under center who can lead this team.
Yeah, it's all going to be about the offensive backfield. I agree with you. But don't forget, they also got the Georgia transfer, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, in there. For once, they have a real leader on defense. And so interested to see how that plays out for a Mark Stoops team. But yeah, I'm with you. Chip Trainum and Brock Vandegrift, they have got to play up to the potential that they were supposed to have at their previous schools. And obviously, Vandegrift, he may have that. He just wasn't given an opportunity to show that. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, he ran out of eligibility to do it and get it done. Our last team, and before we get up into I think we both shared our contenders and favorites. Before we get into those, my chaos creator, the last one that I have, Texas A&M Aggies. Mike Elko, of course, is going to be his first season as head coach, was defensive coordinator with Jimbo Fisher. The last time that they were actually a pretty decent football team back in 2020. But he is back over there in Aggie land at Kyle Field. Connor Wegman, I'm going to go back to the quarterback position. He's talented. He's somebody who a lot of people talked about how he could be that kind of gunslinger to come in. And I very quickly hesitate to ever compare anybody to Johnny Manziel. But he can move around the pocket. He can make things happen with his legs. He can make good throws. Now he's got, I just want to see him do it on a consistent level. Colin Klein is going to come in and be his offensive coordinator, a consistent offensive coordinator who was over at Kansas State. I think they're returning him, and this was kind of a stagnant team under Jimbo Fisher. Stagnant, I think, was the perfect way to describe it. And Mike Elko, I think, is going to bring a little bit more of that grit, a little bit more of that consistency, a little bit more of that day-to-day that they were lacking with Jimbo Fisher. I don't know if this year is necessarily going to be the year, but I like what Mike Elko can do. I think he's a damn good football coach. I think he's a guy who is going to get this defense back to where it really should be with the amount of talent that they have on this roster. You should be a good football team. I don't know. I need to see it to believe it on the offensive side. But as far as the defense is concerned, I think they'll come in and be an immediately strong team.
Yeah, I mean, my question is, I think this is one of their least talented teams in the most recent years. But obviously, what does a head coaching change do for you? Because I mean, there's no lack of talent for Jimbo. They just didn't get it done for one reason or another. And I'm not saying there's a lack of talent now, but it's maybe a little bit less than it has been in recent years, in my opinion. So can Mike Elko get the best out of his players? That's certainly not what Jimbo did.
No, he wasn't. And look, the defensive line is going to be really good. And I think you're talented in the right places to win football games. Texas A&M is. You're good on the offensive line. You're good enough on the offensive line. You're really good on the defensive line. Um, and you'll be able to lean on that defense for Connor Wegman to kind of get going and get his legs under him, his sea legs, if you will. And I think that ultimately, like the conference is going to be very interesting. And Texas teams like Texas A&M make it that way. But let's jump into. Well, actually, no. I have one more team in my chaos creator. It's going to be the Oklahoma Sooners. I forgot our first newcomer, the team that seemingly everyone forgot about when we were over at SEC Media Days, listening to all that stuff. Brent Venables is leading a very good team. I mean, the Oklahoma Sooners can come in here. They were maybe a couple plays away from playing in a Big 12 championship game. They actually beat Texas. They're one of the only team to do it in the regular season. But we know what they can do when they can get up in the Red River Shootout. But ultimately, are they ready for that transition to the SEC? I don't know if they have the dudes necessarily. Jackson Arnold is going to be under center. I really like what he can do. He has shown flashes of just being a truly dominant playmaker under center. But I just got questions. I have questions, and I wonder what they look like in their first year in the SEC.
Yeah, I have some concerns about them as well. It's the day in, day out, and I just don't. Jackson Arnold, I just got to see it. I think they've got a couple of returning starters on offense, but they got a bunch of new guys that they're going to be counting on as well. Maybe a little bit less so in defense. This is going to sound odd, but the loss of Stoops at receiver, he was such a security blanket for that whoever was going to be quarterback. They got to find a couple of go-tos, and that's the thing for me is who's their go-to guy on offense. It had been Stoops in recent seasons, and I don't know who that guy is now.
Well, they're hoping it's going to be Deion Burks, the transfer from Purdue.
Yeah.
I mean, when he was with the Boilermakers, I mean, he was really good. He's a guy who goes off 47 catches, 629 yards, 7 touchdowns. But you're also replacing Dylan Gabriel. And your hope is that Jackson Arnold can come in and be that everyday starter, something he didn't have to be last year. And I mean, he did have 4 turnovers in that game. People, I mean, he's a highly talented, highly sought after type of player. And I need to see that consistency. And Oklahoma was kind of lacking that last year. You saw when they're playing really good football, you can see how I think they can compete with just about any team outside of your contenders. But can they get to that next level? I just don't know if Brent Venables is that guy yet. He's still establishing that culture. He's trying to get things going. But we will see, because most of their losses, if they lose games, 7 of the 10 losses have come in one possession games, if you can believe that. But now you have to work cut out for it. You got a more difficult schedule coming in to the SEC. But and I do want to go through that real quick because you're looking at when you compare. We're going to discuss this too when we get to Texas, because you get Houston at home on September 7th, and then it's Tennessee at home on September 21st. That's going to be your SEC opener. But then you go immediately on the road to the Auburn Tigers, and then it's Texas for the Red River Shootout, South Carolina at home, at Ole Miss, you have at Missouri, Alabama at home, and at LSU. The end of that schedule is absolutely brutal. It's going to be tough for Oklahoma in their first season in the SEC.
Yeah, I just think, and I'm with you. I think, and I we'll get to this with Texas as well, but like being up for it every single week is not something you had to do in the Big 12. You could get away with it not having your best. You have got to have your best, one for the teams ahead of you, which there are many, but also for the teams behind you who are hungry and out to prove something. Anything less than your best on any given Saturday can cost you.
A team who I see as a potential wild card, a team that can jump into that favorite category, who's a really, really good team, depending on the quarterback. Nico Almaleva and the Tennessee Volunteers. Dylan Simpson is in that backfield. Squirrel White is out wide. I really like this team. I think that they are going to be a very good team in 2024. I have a couple of questions just in terms of just the consistency of doing it. I don't know. Just when Josh Heupel has his guy under center, this team just seems to find a different gear. That's how they were a number one offense in America the last time they had a really consistent quarterback under center. Last year, you have Joe Milton. That guy, he just were. It was kind of an inconsistent sort of situation for Tennessee. But if they can stay ahead of the chains, they got a running back who they can really trust and lean on in Dylan Sampson. I think he can be that guy. Chris Braswell as well on the outside alongside a Squirrel. That makes for a compelling offensive case for the Tennessee Volunteers.
I might be incorrect here, but Garrett, I think they got 5 seniors on that offensive line as well, led by Cooper Mays. And so they should
That's
give
a good thing.
Nico a little bit of protection, a little bit of opportunity there. Look, we've been talking about it for how long? If Nico's the real deal, this is a team that can get back to where they were under Hendon Hooker and be a top 5, top 6 team. But we're not putting them there yet because we haven't seen it yet. It's as simple as that. But you're right. They got playmakers on the outside. They got a strong offensive line. If the quarterback is the 5-star that he was supposed to be, this could be one of the best offenses in the country. And whether your defense is top 5, top 10, top 30, you can do damage with an offense like that.
Yeah, look, you have a secondary that lost 11 guys to the portal or to graduation, and that's been a weakness for this team for years. I got questions in the secondary. If the secondary can finally figure itself out, you can get into that next level. But until then, you're relying on really good offensive play, which for the most part should be enough for the Tennessee Volunteers. The next team here is are the LSU Tigers, a team who I really, really see, and these are all teams who I see as college football contenders at this point. Garrett Nussmeier is here to replace Jaden Daniels under center. Mason Taylor is back at tight end. Kyron Lacey at wide receiver. Emory Jones is going to be there as well. Harold Perkins is going to be a beast on the defensive side, and we'll see if they bring in a new defensive coordinator. If the new DC came in over from Mississippi State, you got to be better than what they were last year. This is an LSU team that has absolutely no excuse to be as bad on defense as they were last year. There is way too much talent for this team to lack so badly like they did last season. The offense, I think, is going to be strong with Garrett Nussmeier. CJ Daniels on the outside, I think, is going to be an interesting newcomer to watch for this group. But Garrett Nussmeier can cook that ball down the field. We saw it in the SEC championship game. We've seen it in flashes at times. I really like what the LSU Tigers can do with Brian Kelly next year, assuming the defense is good.
Yeah, look, they lost 2 receivers to the top end of the draft, and so they're going to need to replace them. But if they can, Nussmeier, as you mentioned, can deliver. And yeah, with Harold Perkins there, you have got to be better defensively, and you've got to find a way to make him more impactful. You've got to maximize what he does, what his talents are. They didn't do anywhere near enough of that last year, and it certainly cost them on the field. Need to be better there this year.
Yeah, just when you thought you got rid of Alabama, not so fast, my friend. November 9th, that's going to be a really fun one, as always. Moving into our other teams. Now these are teams that are like sitting in the top 10 of preseason rankings. I have these 2 teams in my contender list, not necessarily your favorites. We'll start with the Missouri Tigers. Eli Drinkwitz exploded last season. Not a lot of people expected this team to be nearly as good as they were last year. Schrader, of course, has gone to the NFL, but back are, more importantly, Luther Burden is going to be back here. Brady Cook took a big step forward again in his took a big step forward last season. I think this team could be right back to where it was last year, and it's because the defensive line is really good again. The offensive line is going to be solid. You're returning damn near everybody on that unit. Your right tackle, your center, your left guard, basically your entire wide receiver room. They're going to be solid. They'll be able to throw the ball effectively, but can they win those big games? You did it against Tennessee. You weren't able to get it done against Georgia. I'm interested to see if that happens.
Yeah, a couple of things. You do have to replace the leadership of Cody Schrader. And I don't care what star he was or walk on, none of that stuff. He was absolutely a behemoth and a leader for that offense. You got to be tasked with that. Here's the other thing, Garrett, is you're not sneaking up on anyone this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that did certainly play in their favor to an extent last year. But everyone knows what you're all about. Everyone knows what quarterback can do and what Burden can do as well. You're not sneaking up on anyone. And so that idea of taking them lightly, that's not going to happen this year. And we'll see how they handle getting every team's best.
Yeah, look, Luther Burden's back at wide receiver. Most important of all. I mean, he's going to be one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver in all of college football next season. He certainly has a case. He's an all SEC front runner, could be the offensive player of the year in the conference, and would not surprise me if that were to be the case. But now let's get into our favorite category, at least my favorite category. Taking up the rear of this list is a team who graduated somebody who they didn't expect to be graduating. It's Nick Saban. And he moved on to retirement, but that doesn't mean that they're a bad football team all of a sudden. Like some people like to think that they are. Jalen Milroe is still there. You do lose Isaiah Bond, but I got some questions on that wide receiver room. But you do still supplement talent with talent. I mean, Ryan Williams is going to be there. Jam Miller is going to be there. You're going to have guys under center who are going to be solid. Jalen Milroe is going to be good. I have questions about what that offense looks like with Jalen Milroe. I think if we see the guy from the beginning of the season last year, maybe this team struggles a little bit. It's not an easy schedule. But if we see the guy that we saw against Georgia, against the end of the game against Auburn, against Texas A&M, this team is not going to miss a beat. They're going to be a really damn good football team again.
Yeah, look, as odd as this may seem, I'm waiting for the defense to get back to where it was. I know they had some elite cornerbacks last year, but they didn't necessarily play like that. They really didn't. And so I'm interested to see if they can get back to that, especially in the secondary. I mean, big time in the secondary. And then also, as always, it's been the tradition at Alabama. You lose a pass rusher, another guy steps up, right? You lose Will Anderson and Dallas Turner's right there. Who's the next guy in line? Interested to see that. And then it's got to be back to the run game. I think they've had some high-end running backs that maybe didn't perform to the level of what is possible. And I know it's fun and gun and all that stuff nowadays, but I still think the bread and butter's a run game. So Jam Miller, Justice Haynes, it's up to you. Take a little pressure off of Jalen Milroe. But, if they can figure out what worked for Jalen Milroe in the second half of the season, as you mentioned, that did not work in the first half of the season, they can be very dangerous. There's no doubt about that.
Keep your eye out for Justice Haynes, though. Like you mentioned,
yeah,
quality running back from the state of Georgia. One of the best players who came out of the state of Georgia 2 years ago. I'm very excited to see what he can do next year. I think he's going to have a bigger workload this year. Jalen Milroe. Now he gets a quarterback whisperer in Kalen DeBoer. And Kalen DeBoer doesn't lose a lot. No matter where he's been, he's won at every level.
No, but the interesting thing here is this is not necessarily his quarterback. And so is he going to ask Jalen Milroe to roll his offense, or is he going to, adjust his offense to the skill sets of Jalen Milroe? That's also something I'll be looking out for in the first couple of weeks of the season.
Yeah, one key number to keep in mind, 18 different players, 18 upperclassmen who are going to be potentially starting for this Alabama team. Talented as always. One other team I want to talk about too, the Ole Miss Rebels, a team who under center you got Jackson Dart. Walter Nolan is the new addition, the former 5-star and one of the best defensive players in the SEC last season, came in from Texas A&M. This team is experienced. You lose Quinshon Judkins, but you get Trey Harris back. I think this team is going to be pretty good again this year. Ulysses Bentley IV is going to come in and be that other guy at the running back position. And I don't know if you're going to miss a beat without Quinshon Judkins. I mean, he's one of the best players at the running back position in America. Now he's going to be an Ohio State Buckeye and splitting carries with Travion Henderson. But I think Jackson Dart should be enough to get you up over the hump. Jordan Watkins is another guy who you can look at it. They're going to be a really good offense with Lane Kiffin. I just want to see them win those big games. They have not been able to get it done. Whenever they run up against a Georgia, against an Alabama, they get smoked. Very similar to what you see against Penn State. It's a team who comes in flying high and beats up a lot of bad teams. And then when it comes to the big boys, they get their lunch money taken. I want to see them do it against the big boys this year, and I think they'll have an opportunity to do that. Georgia comes to them. Oklahoma comes to them. But outside of that, you're on the road at LSU, and then not a lot on that schedule. The schedule is pretty forgiving. So you don't have to see those big dogs outside of Georgia, really, maybe LSU, until the SEC championship game. And don't laugh, because they might be one of the teams that ends up playing there when it's all said and done.
A couple of things jump out to me. You mentioned Jackson Dart. You still got Trey Harris on the outside, who's been
Oh
outstanding.
yeah, Trey Harris.
But they are replacing a number of offensive linemen. They have going to have at least half of their defense is going to be made up of new starters, many of them transfers. And the question is, with a team that raids the transfer portal the way they did this year, how quickly does it gel? How quickly can they come together? Because that's the one thing that I think can slow them down, especially on offense, is a little bit of misalignment along the offensive line. So that's one of the things that you're looking for early in the season. You hope they figure that out quickly because if they do, look, they got Nolan, they got Princely, but they are new, and they've got to make it work along the defensive line as well. A lot of talent. But can you get it to gel? Can it all come together? That's the question.
Abe, I got a question for you. What are you doing on October 19th?
I don't know. I think the next day is the ATL 10 miler. So probably hydrating.
Well, I know what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be watching the matchup between Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck. Austin, Texas. It's going to be a lot of fun, and that's the team we're going to talk about real quick here. As we're wrapping up here on the College Football Overtime podcast, we got two teams to talk about. First up, the Texas Longhorns. Quinn Ewers under center, slimmed down last season. He improved in just about every single statistical category. He's a really good quarterback. He's a guy who has a really good backup too. A name that a lot of people know, Arch Manning. You have experience at that position. Very important. You've experience on the offensive line. Another really important position. But you know where you are missing experience? Wide receiver, running back, tight end. Every single skill position you have to replace this season. Isaiah Bond comes in. He should be a good player. How quick does he mesh? How much are you really going to miss Xavier Worthy? A guy with that 4.2 speed isn't replaced very easily. A.D. Mitchell has more big game experience than just about anybody in the country. Yeah, I mean, the guy had catches in the national championship game and playoff. I mean, the dude had, I think, 4 or 5 touchdowns in between 4 games. And so the guy knows how to get it done when the lights are very bright. But ultimately, you've got Quinn Ewers. You've got a good offensive line to protect him. I think they'll figure out the rest. And Steve Sarkisian, I mean, the dude loves to work. He's got this team ready to gearing up and ready to get back after it. But it's the inexperience that gives me pause. But they have a brutally easy schedule. Like, if you talk about a Texas coming to the SEC, this was not the schedule that I had in mind for them. I really wanted to see them matched up against some of the best in the conference. They do get that matchup against Georgia, and that's juicy as all get out. But outside of that, a whole lot of nothing. But this should be a good team in 2024. One of the best, one of the favorites to win the SEC.
Yeah, look, the loss of C.J. Baxter cannot be overstated. It's going to be up to J-Don Blue and company because they need to take some of that pressure off of Quinn Ewers, at least early in the season, as he does start to really ramp up the chemistry with those trio of new receivers, a couple of them from SEC schools, Silas Bolden, Matthew Golden out of Houston, and then, as you mentioned, Isaiah Bond. So really interested to see that trio of receivers as they develop. And then it just goes back to, I know you mentioned the schedule is not the toughest thing in the world. Don't let Texas know that. Like, this goes back to what we said with Oklahoma. Like, if you don't bring your best on a given day, you will get got in the SEC. And there are dangerous teams that, you look at it and say Texas should win that game. But we also sat and watched Texas, and I don't remember who it was. There was a team last year that had no business being on the field with Texas, and it was tied at the end of the third quarter. And now Texas ended up blowing them out in the fourth quarter, whatever it was. But they've got to focus and bring their best. And I think that's the challenge as much as any in regards to that. And then challenge for a number of these guys, but certainly for Quinn Ewers, keep the focus on the season, not on the NFL draft. Carson Beck's going to have to deal with that as well.
Absolutely. And Quinn Ewers, I mean, you saw that team. This team had a propensity to sleepwalk occasionally through some games. You're not going to be able to do that. And one game that I do have circled on this schedule, Texas A&M, a game that lots of college football fans have missed sorely for several years. Once Texas A&M moved into the SEC, they went away from this rivalry. And I think people are about to get a very interesting lesson as to why these two teams hate each other so much. And I'm really excited to have Texas in this conference. But I wonder how quick it takes for them to wear out their welcome in the Southeastern Conference. But let's move into a team that has not lost a regular season game since I think it's like almost 1,500 days or something crazy like that. I don't know what the number is. Um, it's the Georgia Bulldogs. They're the best team in the conference. The conference runs through Athens as of right now. They only got stronger. Trevor Etienne is going to match up with Roderick Robinson in that backfield. Carson Beck under center, of course. You have your wide receiver room is returning a lot of talent. Dylan Bell, not Robert Thomas, but then Oscar Delp is going to be a freak at tight end. And look, Kirby Smart's the best coach in America. The defense is going to be strong. I have some questions about whether the big uglies on that defensive line are going to be enough to really take that team to the next level this year, because you don't have a Jalen Carter, you don't have the dudes in that group who historically were the team what buoyed this team and created the fearsome defenses that Georgia became known for under Kirby Smart. But the offense is going to be electric. They're going to put up a ton of points, and the defense, I think, is going to be strong as ever. Maybe not quite at that number one level, number one in the country, but I think they're going to be a really good football team this season.
I got two things, one on offense, one on defense. Last year in the key games, in the key moments, you could go to Brock Bowers, you can go to Ladd McConkey. Who steps up as the reliable go-to guy for Carson Beck this year? I think Dylan Bell, as you mentioned, has an opportunity to become that guy, but you knew you had it last year. And those guys were big-time playmakers when they really needed them. I mean, there are a couple games you look at last year that they do not win without those two guys eaten in the fourth quarter. And then the other aspect of this is really interesting. This is a team that's built to beat the other top contenders. I mean, you look at Texas, Quinn Ewers and that trio of receivers we talked about. You look at Ohio State with Ibuka and Jeremiah Smith, and Alabama as well. This is the best secondary in the country. This is the best secondary in the country. And I think if you can get guys like Brinson and Nazir Stackhouse and five-star Michael Williams and some of the linebackers, Smile Monday, I mean, they're loaded on defense. If they can get to the passer, because the secondary's ready to defend, and they're just so complete. Like I said, the only question I would have, who becomes the go-to guy in the big moments on offense?
Yeah, and obviously, like, any questions that I might have about the Georgia Bulldogs are just first world problems. They're not really problems.
You got to find a weakness somewhere, right?
You got to find a weakness.
Who's their kicker this year? Oh, no, never mind. He's good too.
Oh, that's right.
Don't worry about Peyton Woodring. Don't worry about him.
Oh yeah, they might have all SEC guys literally across the board. They're going to be the best team in America. They are, and that's just sort of how it is. But the biggest question is the schedule going to come up and bite them? And the last thing we'll say about the University of Georgia here is you start the season with Clemson. They should win that game comfortably, but Clemson's still a good football team. They're a team that can play some stout defense. You're on the road to Kentucky, a place that's given them pause in the past. You're at Alabama. That's going to be a brutal place to play. And really, that's the chance for them to establish themselves as the cream of the crop in the wake of Nick Saban moving on to retirement. Auburn's not easy, but that's at home. Mississippi State's at home. You're on the road, or you're on the road at Texas. You have Florida. You're on the road at Ole Miss. You have Tennessee at home. Look, you have really good football teams. I'm talking like top 15 level football teams. You have several of them. A lot of the lists I've seen there, Georgia's in like that 15 to 20 range of like most difficult schedule in the country. I put them in the top, closer to the top 5. They're about 5, 6, 7 on that list of toughest schedule in the country. You have a chance to play 4 teams in the top 10. 3 of those are going to be on the road. This is a brutal schedule for the University of Georgia. I want to see what they can do. I don't think that there's any chance that they miss the playoff this year. I think they would take an act of God for them to miss the playoff. But there's a very real chance that they drop a game for the first time in 3 years. There's a chance that they drop 2 games for the first time since 2020. It's a tough schedule. And you play a lot of road games, a lot of difficult road games.
I want to say this about Carson Beck. I'm not sure I buy Carson Beck. And not in like that. What I mean by that is if this guy is legitimately one of the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in college football and not just a Heisman potential, but like one of the top 4 or 5 draft picks in the NFL, Georgia's not going to lose. I'm not saying he's not good, but if he's great,
Yeah.
the whole country's in trouble. And I'm not necessarily sold on him being great, only because I think having Brock Bowers, having Ladd McConkey, and having the offensive line that he has and will have this year, by the way, certainly buoys him. He stepped up
Yeah.
in some big moments last year, though. There's no denying that. But man, like, that's what you've got to kind of hope for if you're some other team is that, all right, maybe we went a little too far on Carson Beck, because if he is that guy, if he is one of the top 2 Heisman contenders, if he is one of the top 2 or 3 picks in the NFL draft, like the whole country's in trouble.
Yeah. Well, look, the perfect example of this is Carson Beck needs to step up in those big moments. You saw the thing that you saw with Stetson Bennett when he was under center at Georgia was it didn't really matter what the situation was. The dude was a baller and he was going to go get it. Despite his diminutive stature and lack in talent that Carson Beck doesn't seem to have, or he doesn't have. He's got all the talent in the world. He's got great size. He's got all the intangibles for the position. But what Stetson Bennett was able to do was to find that next gear, get that next level, and unlock that potential for the Georgia program. That's why they won 2 national championships, Abe. Carson Beck, when he was in that situation, he fumbles the ball against Alabama. It's not completely his fault. But those are situations where that just can't happen because you go on to lose that football game, in large part because of that. Carson Beck, he was leading the better team, not Jalen Milroe. Carson Beck didn't play a bad game, but sometimes you need to find that next gear, and that means 1, 2, 3, or 4 plays. But that's why you have guys like Carson Beck under center. That's why you have guys like Quinn Ewers under center. That's why you have elite players. Elite players make elite plays, and Carson Beck needs to do that in 2024. That's the expectation for him. It's the expectation for Kirby Smart. It's been the expectation for years, and I think they're the favorite to win a 3rd college football playoff national championship in 4 years. I'd be surprised if they aren't in that SEC championship game when it's all said and done. But look, the SEC as a conference is going to be a ton of fun to follow in 2024. Lots of teams can come up here and win it. I would not be surprised with any combination of teams. But look, lots of college football discussion right here on the College Football Overtime podcast. Make sure you follow along. Give us a like. Give us a subscription, man. We'll talk a lot of ball. Abe Gordon, Garrett Chapman here. Thank you so much for joining us. Say goodbye to Chipper for everybody. He's got to go use the bathroom, so we'll let Abe Gordon go. But for Abe Gordon, for myself, Garrett Chapman, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you again next week, and happy college football season. It is upon us. We'll see y'all again on Sunday. Thanks so much.